Almost like I brought a bow and arrow to a gunfight. I'm out of my league, I didn't know what this.
Today we're going to talk about diversity, equity and inclusion like it's never been talked about before. The very construct, the very fabric of what's being rolled back. I want to make it not about the chaos, but in that chaos, find the root that we actually need to talk about. We actually need to talk about and flip to what it means when we say we roll it back. It means homogeneity, it means inequitable access, and it means exclusion. Think about that. Take those words, because this week we've seen what does that mean in behaviour? What does that mean when no one really challenges your thoughts or actions? Because you're surrounded by yes men. And I do say yes men, they're predominantly yes men, a few other puppets. What does that mean? What does that mean when there's no meaningful innovation? Because you can't have a thought outside what you don't know. There may be some luxury issues or challenges, but innovation is about solving problems. It's about whys, and you can't see what you can't see. And if no one is speaking up because they don't have the ovaries, I always say ovaries rather than balls to speak up, then what happens? This isn't just about Trump. This has been going on for decades. You look at Boeing. If people don't feel it's safe to speak up, look at the disasters that you have. Is there an issue? Is there an error? Will someone whistleblow? Is there perhaps a good idea that we need to hear? So what did we see this week? We saw exactly what homogeneity, inequitable access and exclusion stands for. We saw a war planning session run on a group chat. And not one person's thought to say, you know what, I think it's a bad idea. You know, it's unsecure. This is the kind of behaviour that we see for a very actually long time. And you take it outside of the war room, you're seeing it all over. Trump has surrounded himself by yes people. So when he says, you know what, we're going to just raise tariffs, shooting from the hip, 25%. And you look at the consequences. No one thought to say, have you thought about the interconnectedness of where our parts, of where our products are made because of where we are in industry? That predominantly, for many years, the global north has got itself to a point where it said, we're in the service industry and the tertiary industry. And those primary and secondary industries are not where they need to be. Now, not to say it's a bad idea to look at how do we start to have production in our own country. But this is not a short-term plan. Why does everything need to be on demand? And it's not just our kids, you know, they expect the next Netflix flow to come. In adult life, when we're adulting in companies, we want something in the next quarter now. It's not even the next year, the next quarter, because it has to be to a shareholder price. And now we're seeing the flow through of that through to governments. So what has actually happened when no one says, you know what, it's a bad idea? The impact has been tariffs could reduce auto trade by 15%. 15%, people. And Musk, one of the puppets, or you need to look at, he actually funded Trump 270 million, but he actually said it's important to note that Tesla is not unscathed here. The tariff impact on Tesla is still significant. He's right. General Motors have it worse. Sources are saying that 40% of its cars are made in Canada, Mexico, outside of the country, people. So we're looking at think about it, guess it, 14 billion hit on earnings. You know what happens when you have a hit on earnings? Spreadsheets come out. Spreadsheets dehumanize, people are not people. They look at where do we get the savings? Where do we put work? Where can it be done cheaper? It's what we're seeing all over at the moment in terms of, they're not necessarily AI or technology savings. They're in terms of how do we restructure and where do we put costs to get more money. And when governments now put these things in, forcing and driving these changes, because Deutsche Bank have said there'll be about a 1.8% increase needed on the price of a Tesla and a 5.8% increase needed on the price of a General Motor. That's a nearly 6,000 increase you will need to pay, consumer, for the cost of your car. And if you were not already struggling, because you are, because there's a cost of living and the cost of eggs have gone up to the extent that you have an egg heist, what does that mean that you can't even afford a car to get from A to B? And I know when I go across to the States, it's not like here where you go, you know what, I'm going to walk somewhere, I'm going to train somewhere. The car is the very need to go and earn your bread and butter, to go and put a roof over your head. You just need to look at the structure of Tesla's manufacturing, their gigafactories. And while some sit within the US, they still have 20,000 people in Shanghai. They still have 10,000 people in Germany. And guess what? They had already invested in a 10 billion factory in Mexico. Just let that sit with you. And we're not there yet in terms of all-out tariff war and all the levers that could be pulled. Because please remember that most of the debt, a majority of debt, is owned by China. There was some fake news about Japan dropping its bonds. But who's to say that's not a move that couldn't happen? When people start to get fed up of the bullying and childish behaviour that they're seeing by Trump, who's to say that could not happen, that they start dropping and dumping the bonds? So it's not just as simple as they think. And when you surround yourself by homogeneity and yes people, no one is putting their head up above the parapet because they might be gone next. And if Trump really cared about production within his country, then I suggest he surrounds himself with a little bit more diversity. And diversity is deep, people. And this is the thing. Diversity, equity and inclusion, it's also class, it's also sexuality, it's also age, it's also black, brown lives, it's also neurodiversity, it's about deep diversity. And let's face it, it hasn't been about that for a really very long time. There's often just a look on gender, predominantly, I would say, within Europe. There has been, since George Floyd, a performative look. I would say performative look at colour, but it's performative at best. But it's never been about deep diversity. But if it was, they would be saying, well, yes, it's a good idea to look at recreating and bringing industries back, but you actually need to look at upskilling. You actually need to look at your strategy. You actually need to look at how those roles are viewed within society. Most societies in the global north push everyone through to university. Does everyone need a university degree? How are our trade routes, apprenticeship routes? What do they look like? What are we paying people so that when they go towards these careers, they can put bread and butter and eggs on the table? And what do the unions look like that support them? And this is where I get to the point. Trump fired the acting chair of the National Labour Relations Board. He doesn't want any power there. He doesn't want the people. There is power in community. There is power in the people that they never want you to realise. He doesn't want them to come together. So that when he's made these swathing changes in federal government and whatever he wants to set up, if he is going to bring these jobs into the US, he doesn't want that coming from the people. He wants that coming from industry. So if we move slightly away from the macroeconomic, demographic and political changes, not that you ever completely can, because it's all interrelated, there is one man who is wise. Wisdom comes with age, people, and that has been Bernie Sanders. And he called it. he called it a long time ago, because you guessed it, the winner chicken dinner is capitalism. That 270 million that Musk paid in to put the puppet in to the White House to pay and do what he wanted, maybe not the 25% tariff increases, but that's where we are in politics. It's big companies paying for who they want to be in there to bring about what they want and what they need. How did we get here? Because supposedly it was always about the people. Take a listen.
You've got to understand, this is the wealthiest guy in the world right now, worth over $400 billion. You talk about Trump's getting elected and inaugurated. Musk put over $270 million into Trump's campaign, and guess what? He's now the most important person in government. What does that sound like you? Does it sound like a democracy, a government of the people, by the people, or for the people? Or is it really an oligarchy doing the bidding of the very richest people? All right, that's number one. Number two, what concerns me very much is the move toward authoritarianism in this country. You have Trump circumventing and bypassing Congress, deciding, hey, doesn't matter what Congress did. Congress put money into this project. I'm going to do away with it. I don't want to spend that money. It's gone. And that means programs for low-income, working-class people going to be gone. Fortunately, the courts are beginning to put a stop to what he's doing. But that is what he wants to do. But you don't have a democracy if you circumvent the legislative body. And then he's going after the courts. You heard J.D. Vance saying, well, the courts don't have a right to stop what the president is doing. No, really? I mean, that's what 100 plus years of American jurisprudence has been about. So you got oligarchy, and then you have this movement toward authoritarianism. Now, to answer your question, what is the goal? What is the end goal here? The end goal of oligarchy is to make the richest people, who are already phenomenally rich, even richer.
The wisdom. 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck. So when we're talking about homogeneity, that homogeneity isn't thinking about that 60% of people. It's not thinking about paycheck to paycheck. Or the erosion of the middle class, by the way. There is an erosion of the middle class. So, despite this whole impact of douche, you can look at my episode on douche, way before another channel used that. These tax cuts that have now come in completely explode the intent that they wanted to reduce the debt. They actually ended up adding 5 trillion to the debt. So the US debt could rise to 11 trillion. Fundamentally also backed by China. Full circle, people. So this limited thought, or these limiting thoughts, I call them limiting thoughts, limited belief, that all happens when you're homogeneous. You have inequitable access and you exclude the people from being at the table. That will increase, challenge, get you to think from different lenses, lead to a better solution, and have innovation and have growth for the people, for the most marginalised in society. But they don't want that. They want what we termed within the UK, I think it was within the UK, but many years ago, trickle-down economics. That trickle-down economics was like, oh, if we give more to the people up here, more to the billionaires, to the 1%, it will trickle down. Well, you know what? We've learned after many years, it doesn't trickle down. It's getting worse. So what do? What have we seen? They kind of create this tribal warfare. They divide people among themselves that we've seen time and time. 1939, though, was one of the most significant times that Hitler started to create the enemy of the foreigner. The foreigner. There was significant propaganda. This was way before the age of AI. So he didn't have the social media manipulation at his disposal. They want you to think it's about free speech. A whole episode I've done on that, but it's not, because I've actually taken away CDC data. So it's okay when you want free speech and transparency of data, but not when it perhaps shows a different message that you want. They've inflicted trauma on the workplace. They've admitted that. And the USAID they've removed was actually helping people with things like Meals on Wheels and keeping the world safe. Making sure that we did not destabilize a very interconnected world. So that removal of safety first started with the foreigner, and everyone else thought, it's okay, it's not me, it's that suspicious black or brown looking person, it's okay. I'm being sarcastic, obviously, but make no mistake, no one is safe when you start to slide and reduce the rights of human beings. And it's something that black and brown people have been knowing for a long time. So now we have Trump deciding that he can disregard the laws, the judges. Watch as someone is taken off the street for just voicing over Gaza, the genocide that is happening at the moment and has been aided and abetted by the US administrations. If you're not scared or you're not terrified by plainclothes people turning up and taking you when you have a visa to be in the country, I suggest you should be. There has been a Canadian detained. There has been a doctor with a visa who could not return. Doesn't matter what profession you are. There has been a German citizen held entering the US because they criticised Trump. There has been a French scientist refused access. So the Esther refused because they criticised Trump. There are children who now are not entitled to a lawyer. Unaccompanied children not entitled to basic human rights. And all of that, are we saying that's okay? How far have we slid, people? Because no one is safe. And if you're so for life, you're pro-life, if you don't even think about the impact of those children being deported without any due process, without any lawyer, and what does that mean to human trafficking, abuse, those industries that are all around us underneath drugs, crime, pornography. Where do you think those children go? So remember that when all of those advocating for free speech, pro-life, come back and then look at the fascism that we're seeing. Look at the Orwellian society that we're seeing. And all of this against a backdrop of bombs being dropped against anyone that supports Gaza, organised over a group chat, and bombs being dropped in Gaza, killing children and women, innocents and civilians. Why I say no one's safe is that has now led to the State Department revoking 300 visas from students. We used to have this enrichment of students from different cultures coming in, bringing different perspectives, bringing different understandings, different insights. That enrichment going both ways, going into the countries. Obviously, I'm from the UK, coming into the Cambridges, the Oxford, where I grew up, but also back to their countries to make amazing impacts. but they're being revoked. Their visas are being revoked. Since October 7th, some 50,000 people have been murdered, slaughtered, genocide in Gaza. And I do pick my words with intent, because it's not just killed, they have been targeted. And it doesn't matter how much we march, how much we boycott, it keeps happening. So we need to keep writing to our politicians, and I don't know what's going to break for it to change, but we need to be on the right side, because the dehumanization of people just because they're black and brown is not right. What it means is we slid in human rights and no one is safe. The third and brief topic I want to touch on in diversity, equity, inclusion is the term woke. I was woke a long time ago, and I own that with pride. But there has been appropriation of the language to oppress it, to make it something farcical, to mock it into something that it's not. Now, do you see? Are you awake yet? Are you awake? Are you boycotting? Are you making smarter consumer decisions? For those that never cared about you, the metas of this world, are you marching? Are you speaking up? Or are you too scared because of your job profile? But yet 50,000 plus now people have been murdered. Have you written to your politician? These are the things that need to happen. Because when we go to the roots of the people that actually are the indigenous people of the US, when we go to who owns that land, and you just look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, the real indigenous people, they talked about two-spirit people, for example. The values of the people that own that country recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion. It didn't stand for homogeneity. They recognized that you could have more than one spirit within you. You could love people for their soul of who they are. They are brown. We are visitors to this planet. We are overusing it, or were overusing it by 1.5 times before AI even came in. I shudder to think how much we're overusing it now. So the companies that let it slide, that decided to just fall like dominoes, like a house of cards, those are the ones that have eradicated diversity, equity, inclusion, and actually stand for homogeneity. But they actually had centuries of systematic and structural colonialization, patriarchy, and supremacy. And now, if anything, that's just transparent. Because the thing is, it was always there. You look at companies, big fours, that have swayed under the pressure, and you look at the cases that were against them. It was nothing more than ever performative. But then you look at the brave ones, you look at the trailblazers, and you look at the people who still, in the point of pain, are standing up. They're standing up. Love the campaign by Alf. So many dicks. And that's what we need now. We need people to stand up. Even if it's hard. Even if it may mean some pain. Because that pain, some communities have been experiencing for a very long time. Homogeneity, inequitable access, and exclusion is nothing new. It's now hoods are off. So who are you when those hoods come off? What will you say to your children, your godchildren, your nieces, your nephews, 10, 15 years from now, about what you did for humanity.
I need you to take my pain and make it something